I was halfway through hanging up the last string of fairy lights when I heard the unmistakable sound of judgmental heels clicking down the sidewalk. You know that sound. Sharp, purposeful, like each step is trying to stab a hole in your happiness. And just like that, I knew. The party hadn't even started, and the HOA queen herself was already on the warpath. Before I tell you how one birthday balloon turned into a neighborhood revolution, take 2 seconds and hit that subscribe button. Because you won't believe how this ends, and trust me, you're going to want to be here when it does. It was my daughter's 8th birthday. Nothing extravagant. No ponies, no bounce houses, no DJ. Just some kids from the block, a folding table with cupcakes, a Bluetooth speaker, and a bubble machine that probably cost less than Meryl Streep's lunch. But apparently that was enough to trigger Marilyn, capital letters always, our HOA president, who treated our cul-de-sac like her personal kingdom. She appeared just as I was duct taping the final streamer to the garage door. "Mr. Lawson," she said, voice all pinched and polished like she'd practiced it in the mirror. "I wasn't notified of an event." I turned, confused for a second. "Event?" She blinked, slow, like I was a toddler smearing pudding on the wall. "Yes, this gathering. I don't see any documentation in the HOA request logs." "It's a birthday party for my daughter." "That still qualifies as a residential event requiring notice, especially if there will be—" She glanced at the row of foldable chairs I'd borrowed from my brother. "Guests. There's like 10 kids coming over to eat cake in the driveway. And music," she added, pointing to the small speaker I hadn't even turned on yet. "Noise disturbances fall under our noise clause. Section 4, subsection B." I bit my tongue. This woman once fined a neighbor $50 because their Halloween pumpkin encouraged rodent congregation. "I'll keep the volume down." I would advise that, and make sure cars don't block any sidewalks or driveways. If you'd read the revised parking policy, I did. We're good. The parents will park on my side of the street. She gave me a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "We'll see." Then she took out her phone, one of those massive ones with a glittery case, and started snapping pictures of the decorations, of the chairs, of my house, my actual house. "What are you doing?" "Documenting. For records. Is that really necessary?" "Mr. Lawson," she said, her mouth flattening into a tight little hyphen. "Rules exist for a reason. This is a community, not a carnival." With that, she turned and marched off, heels clicking like a metronome set to rage. I stood there for a second, heart pounding with something between disbelief and fury. My daughter came out onto the porch just then, dressed in a sparkly blue dress, her hair done up in the twist my sister had helped with earlier. "Daddy, is it time?" I smiled, swallowing the anger. "Almost, sweetie." The party, despite Marilyn's storm cloud hovering nearby, was a success. Kids laughed. They chased bubbles, smeared icing on their faces, and screamed happy birthday loud enough to startle birds out of trees. Parents mingled, even helping with cleanup without being asked. For a couple of hours, everything felt right, until the envelope came the next morning. A thick beige envelope with the HOA seal stamped on the front like a wax curse. Inside, a formal citation. "Violation, unauthorized residential gathering exceeding permitted noise threshold and public space usage. Fine, $250, no warning, no conversation, just a fine." And at the bottom, in tidy print, "Future unauthorized gatherings may incur escalating penalties, including formal legal action." I stared at it in disbelief. I'd followed every guideline I knew, kept noise low. No blocked driveways. Party ended before sundown, but none of that mattered to Marilyn. That night, I emailed the HOA board. No response. Called the HOA hotline. Straight to voicemail. I even sent a message through the community portal. Nothing. 3 days later, I found a bright orange notice taped to my front door. "Final notice regarding unpaid violation." As if I was some delinquent squatter throwing raves at 3 a.m. instead of a dad giving his kid a moment of joy. The next time I saw Marilyn, she was walking her little dog, a yappy white puffball that barked at everything, including its own reflection. I approached her calmly. Hi, Marilyn. I just wanted to ask about the fine. It's been issued, she said without stopping. Nothing more to discuss. But I followed the rules. There wasn't any disturbance. Everyone parked responsibly. You held an unapproved event. The rules are clear. Then she added, eyes narrowed. We can't have this place turning into a free-for-all. That's not why people move here. And that's when I realized this wasn't about rules. This was about control, about power, about one woman playing queen with a gavel made of bylaws and threats. And maybe, just maybe, it was time someone knocked her off that little throne. The next Saturday morning, I decided to mow the lawn. I needed the noise of the engine to drown out the knot forming in my chest. The orange violation notice was still on the kitchen counter, staring at me like an unpaid debt, which, technically, it was. Halfway through the backyard, I noticed a shadow near the fence, not moving, just watching. It was Marilyn. Standing at the edge of the sidewalk, arms folded, sunglasses on like she was auditioning for a suburban cop drama, I killed the engine. Something I can help you with? I called out. She didn't blink. Measuring noise levels. This is borderline. Of what? Lawnmower decibels? On a Saturday? There are acceptable time windows. You're fine for now, she said, already scribbling something onto a clipboard. A real clipboard. But we're keeping records. We? She didn't answer, just walked away. Later that day, I talked to my neighbor Steve while checking the mailbox. Steve was a big guy, ex-Marine, and the kind of person who usually kept to himself. But the moment I mentioned the party, his face twisted. She fined me last year because my Christmas lights were aggressively bright. Said they might trigger migraines. No way. Oh yeah, said my inflatable Santa was a safety hazard because it obstructed line of sight. It was on my lawn. He paused, looking around before leaning in. She's been doing this to everyone. Kelly on Cypress Street got fined because her wind chimes created sonic clutter. Larry got cited for having a flag too large. Flag, Jake. How is she still in charge? He let out a dry laugh. Nobody wants the headache of replacing her and the board. Bunch of friends she's roped in over the years. It's all a loop. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the dining table with Marilyn's fine letter in front of me and did what any reasonable man would do. I created a spreadsheet. Name, address, violation, fine, date. I started reaching out, politely, casually, a text here, a knock there. At first, people were hesitant. Some didn't want to talk. Others shared just enough before retreating with a, just let it go, man. But then came Sandra. She invited me into her sunroom, offered coffee, and brought out a thick folder. Inside were printed emails, copies of citations, even photos. She tried to evict my tenant for having a garden gnome, said it constituted unauthorized lawn sculpture. I've been collecting these. There were dozens of them, real violations, vague warnings, even notes slipped into mailboxes with no official letterhead. Some were petty, others downright hostile. She fines the retirees the most, Sandra said. They're the least likely to fight back. It wasn't just control, it was targeted, strategic. The next morning, I sent out a simple message through the neighborhood group chat. Has anyone else had issues with HOA leadership? If so, I'd like to hear your story. That afternoon, I had 12 replies. By evening, 24. By the end of the week, over 40. One email stood out. It was from a woman named Tanya, single mom, lives on the next block over. She'd been fined over $500 in the past 6 months. For what? Her son's bike left leaning against the garage. Her trash can being wheeled out too early. A birthday banner that didn't come down within the 48-hour policy window. But that wasn't all. She threatened to report me to child services because my son drew chalk on the sidewalk. I called her immediately. She said if my domestic orderliness didn't improve, she'd be forced to escalate. That was it. This wasn't bureaucracy. This was abuse. I started recording everything, compiling, documenting. I met with a real estate lawyer, off the books, just for advice. He raised his eyebrows more than once while reviewing the fines. Some of this stuff is definitely overreach, he said, especially if the enforcement is inconsistent. It is. She ignores violations from her friends, even has a cousin who leaves his boat in the driveway half the year. No citations. That's selective enforcement. Get proof. So I did. 3 more neighbors confirmed it. Photos. Time-stamped. One even had a video of Marilyn at a barbecue with those same friends, laughing under a tent clearly set up without a permit. Something I'd been fined for trying to do. And then, the tipping point. I got a letter, not from the HOA, but from a law firm. A cease and desist. It accused me of harassment, community disruption, and defamation of character. I read it 3 times, then laughed. Not because it was funny, and it wasn't, but because it confirmed exactly what I suspected. Marilyn was scared, and that meant one thing. I was onto something real. I posted a message on the community forum. Received a legal threat today for asking neighbors to share their experiences. If you've ever felt silenced, pressured, or punished unfairly by our HOA, I'll be hosting a quiet, off-record meeting at my place this Friday. No cameras, no pressure, just stories. I expected maybe 5 people. I got 17. Some brought folders. Others brought wine. One woman brought cookies because she didn't know what else to do. We sat in lawn chairs in my garage with the door half open and shared stories. Some sad, some infuriating. All of them real. I looked around the room and saw what Marilyn had feared all along. A neighborhood starting to remember it had a voice. By Monday morning, my garage meeting had turned into a movement. People started coming up to me in the grocery store, at the school drop-off lane, even while I filled up my gas tank. Some just gave a thumbs up. Others handed me envelopes filled with printed notices, photos, even handwritten accounts of HOA harassment. A few were nervous. "Please don't use my name," they'd say. "She still scares me." But the tide was shifting. Then came the manila envelope. No return address. Just taped to my front door. Early one morning. Inside, photocopies of internal HOA documents, board meeting minutes, budget reports, email printouts. I wasn't sure who sent it, but the handwriting on the sticky note said enough. If you really want to know what she's been doing, start here. I laid everything out on the dining table. Line by line, it became clear. Marilyn had been reimbursing herself for community development expenses with no receipts. Thousands of dollars under vague terms, event consulting, beautification consulting, logistics planning. No one else signed off on these. No evidence the money went anywhere but her own pockets. Worse, the voting records. Every HOA vote from the past 2 years showed a near unanimous decision in her favor. But when I looked closer, something felt off. The ballots weren't anonymous. They were hand-collected, sometimes even emailed directly to her. One neighbor, Dolores, told me she'd voted against a noise ordinance increase last year, but the record showed her as in favor. Another neighbor said he never voted at all, yet his name appeared on 3 ballots. I took photos of everything, compiled it all in a folder I titled HOA Corruption Evidence. That Friday, I sent out invites for a formal meeting. Not underground this time. Real, legal, and public. We reserved the local library's community room. I wasn't sure if anyone from the board would show, but I sent the invite to all of them anyway, including Marilyn. At 6:03 p.m., the room was already packed. Steve brought folding chairs. Tanya brought her printed citations. Sandra brought her entire folder again. People stood along the walls, some holding coffee cups, others holding signs they'd printed at home. Our HOA, not her HOA. Enforce fairly or step down. No more silence. At 6:07 p.m., Marilyn walked in. Red blazer, clutch purse, tight smile. She made a beeline for the front row and sat, arms crossed like a queen in exile. I took a breath. I wasn't a politician or a lawyer. Just a dad who threw a birthday party and got tired of being pushed around. "I want to thank everyone for coming," I began, "and I want to start with one question. Has anyone here ever felt punished, silenced, or intimidated by our HOA?" Nearly every hand went up. That's when I laid it all out. The evidence, the documents, the stories. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't make speeches. I just showed them what we all already knew, now with proof. And then I said, this isn't about revenge. It's about accountability, fairness, and a community where no one has to fear a sidewalk chalk drawing. Marilyn stood up. This is a smear campaign, she said coldly. Half of what you've presented is hearsay. The other half is cherry-picked nonsense. Do you all really think a neighborhood can function without rules? No one's asking to get rid of the rules, I replied. We're asking for them to apply to everyone, including you. There was silence. Then a voice from the back. My daughter stopped inviting friends over because of the warning letters. Another, you fined me for a missing curtain rod. A curtain rod. More hands went up. More voices joined. Marilyn's face reddened. This is mutiny. This is democracy, Steve said quietly. It wasn't a dramatic explosion. There was no shouting, no chair throwing, just a slow, rising wave of agreement that could no longer be ignored. We took a vote. The bylaws allowed for the removal of a sitting president if a two-thirds majority of homeowners approved it. It took 2 hours, several trips to the copier, and a whole lot of nervous glances. Final count, 84 votes for removal, 12 against, 19 abstained. The room went quiet. Marilyn stood, stiff as a statue. She looked at me like she was memorizing my face for some future revenge. I'll be consulting my attorney, she said. You're free too, I replied. But until then, the neighborhood has spoken. She walked out without another word. It should have felt like victory, but all I felt was relief. Not for me, for my daughter, for Tanya's son, for every person who had hidden their garden lights or shortened their flagpole out of fear. It wasn't over, not yet, but the queen had fallen, and now it was time to rebuild. The following week was a blur. Emails flew, text chains buzzed. For the first time in years, the HOA wasn't something people whispered about. It was dinner table talk, sidewalk, small talk, even a topic during school pickup. The library meeting had opened the floodgates. Turns out Marilyn had more skeletons than we thought. One neighbor, quiet guy named Henry who worked nights, came forward with financial records. His wife had once served on the board briefly before stepping down suddenly. He handed me a flash drive. She backed everything up before leaving, said she didn't trust how things were handled. Inside were years of reports, many of which contradicted the official HOA records. The biggest bombshell? A landscaping contractor named Green Axis Solutions had been paid nearly $12,000 over 2 years. Problem was, it didn't exist. No business license, no contact number, no registered owner. It was a shell. And cross-referencing bank transfers, Sandra, bless her forensic skills, traced multiple payments from the HOA account into a secondary account under the name M.R. Ellis. Marilyn Rose Ellis. She was paying herself through a fake vendor. It all clicked. The vague beautification line items, the consulting fees, the broken sidewalk that never got fixed. She hadn't just abused power, she'd stolen. We called an emergency HOA assembly. Unlike the library meeting, this one was formal, structured. We even brought in a neutral mediator from the county HOA advisory board. The hall was packed, standing room only. At 7 p.m. sharp, I stood before the room with 3 thick binders and a small projector. Marilyn didn't show. The meeting began with a motion to initiate an independent audit, unanimous approval. Then came the motion to suspend all previous fines issued by Marilyn until reviewed individually. Again, unanimous. People spoke, some with voices shaking. I was scared to plant flowers. I hid my daughter's birthday decorations. I used to love this neighborhood. It wasn't just about Marilyn anymore. It was about the culture of fear she had cultivated, and our collective decision to burn it down. Then just when I thought the night couldn't get more surreal, a man in a gray suit stepped forward during open discussion. Name's Joshua Crane, he said. I'm with the county attorney's office. We've been receiving complaints about this HOA for over a year. He opened a briefcase and removed a folder. And based on new evidence submitted this past week, we are officially launching a civil investigation into the financial activities of former President Marilyn Ellis. Gasps around the room. I looked at Sandra. She looked at me. Neither of us smiled. We just nodded. It was happening. But that wasn't even the biggest twist. 2 days later, I got a knock on my door. It was Greg, one of the newer residents. Young, tech-savvy, always wearing earbuds. He looked nervous. Hey, I think you should see this. He handed me his phone. It was security footage from his doorbell cam, time-stamped 2 nights ago, around 1 a.m. On it, Marilyn, wearing dark clothes, hood up, sneaking up to a neighbor's porch, reaching into their mailbox, then walking away. I stood there frozen. She's been doing this all week. I checked other neighbors' cams. Same pattern, usually houses of people who spoke at the meeting. We notified the police. Turns out tampering with or accessing private mail isn't just shady, it's a federal offense. By Thursday, Marilyn was officially under investigation for financial misconduct, voter fraud within an HOA, and mail tampering. She'd gone from HOA queen to criminal suspect in less than 2 weeks. That weekend, we held a block party. No permits, no fines, just people. Kids played tag. Music played from someone's Bluetooth speaker. Somebody grilled burgers. Tanya's son drew the biggest chalk mural I'd ever seen. A dragon that stretched across 3 driveways. I stood back and just watched. This wasn't just about removing a tyrant. It was about remembering what a neighborhood is supposed to feel like. Not a place of surveillance and fines, but a place of trust. And then something unexpected happened. Several neighbors approached me throughout the evening. You should run. For HOA president, seriously. You're the reason this changed. I laughed it off. No, really, you've already done the hard part. I smiled politely, but inside I wasn't so sure. I hadn't started this for power. I just wanted to throw my daughter a party without being treated like a criminal. Still, what if we could make it permanent? I didn't plan to run for HOA president. In fact, when the nomination forms were posted, I ignored them. I figured someone else, maybe Sandra, maybe Steve, would step up. But the morning the deadline closed, I found a note taped to my door. It wasn't hostile, just 7 words handwritten. If not you, it'll be another Marilyn. No signature. That afternoon, I submitted the form. The election wasn't even close. Nearly 90% of votes went my way. Not because I campaigned or made promises. I didn't even print flyers. People just knew. So, 2 months after hosting a birthday party for my daughter and getting fined for it, I found myself sitting at the head of the long conference table in the HOA's dusty clubhouse, staring at a stained notepad that still had Marilyn's doodles in the margins. And for the first time in a long time, the room felt calm. The first thing I did? I proposed a full structural reform of the HOA, term limits for all board positions, no more lifelong presidencies, transparent accounting with monthly reports posted publicly, third-party audits annually, all votes to be anonymous and verifiable, conducted online and in person. We built a new digital system for logging violations, one that required photographic evidence, a timestamp, and at least 2 signatures from separate board members. More importantly, every homeowner could now appeal any citation without intimidation or legal threats. The board approved all of it, unanimously. At the next community meeting, I stood in front of a packed crowd, the same faces that once flinched when Marilyn's car turned the corner, and told them something simple: we're not here to govern, we're here to serve. And people clapped, not politely, loud, grateful, real. Marilyn, meanwhile, had lawyered up. The civil investigation was ongoing, and she'd vanished from the neighborhood. Her house went on the market quietly, and a for sale sign appeared one morning without warning. No one saw her leave. No one threw her a going-away party. But karma did its job. I got an email a few weeks later from an old contact at the county office. Apparently, Marilyn's name came up in a broader investigation into HOA corruption across multiple neighborhoods. Her name was tied to at least 2 other consulting gigs under aliases. Charges were pending. I didn't feel joy, just closure. That spring, I threw another party, same folding chairs, same cupcakes, Same streamers duct taped to the garage. Except this time, the whole block came. Steve brought a bounce house. Tanya baked a cake big enough for 30 people. Even Henry DJ'd with a surprisingly good 80s playlist. And near the end of the night, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and my daughter twirled in her sparkly dress, she ran up to me and said, "Daddy, no one came to yell at us this time." I smiled. "No, sweetheart. No one will." She looked around, thoughtful. "You know what we should do next year?" "What?" "Invite the whole neighborhood again." And for the first time, I didn't hesitate. Absolutely. Because we weren't just neighbors anymore. We were a community again. And not even 1,000 Marilyns could take that away.